So why I am a gamer. I play video games. I enjoy them. I partake in them. It's a part of the nerd experience. But as of lately, it's been kind of obvious that the industry has gone in a various series of directions that may not be as positive for the end consumer as we would like. And I think one of the reasons that this has become a problem is thanks to a particular company. And this video, based off the title, you should already know, is going to be talking about that company in full and why I think they are absolutely trash and how they've added nothing to the industry of value. So if you're someone who's very emotionally attached to this brand, I would advise you to lean the fuck back, because it's gonna be an experience and you may not be ready for it. But if you're willing to have this journey with me and allow me to explain my case, I will hopefully try to make it your while. With all that being said, let's begin. So full transparency, I don't have a lot of emotional attachment to Xbox. I grew up as a mainly Sega Nintendo kid and then eventually became a Nintendo PlayStation kid. So I recognize that me saying all this may come off a little biased, but I'm going to try to be as objective as possible as going through all these problems, because a lot of people think that modern Xbox's issues come from the Xbox One and their mistakes and then carried over to the Xbox Series consoles. And in reality, it's a lot deeper than that. So Xbox's original reason for even getting into the console business is when they noticed how much of the market share PlayStation was starting to get. And they feared that they would lose out on their gaming division of Windows to PlayStation. Now, this in itself isn't inherently a bad thing, as competition tends to bring out the best for the consumers. We tend to get better products and more interesting sales and competitive prices. So by itself, not a big deal. And then the original Xbox came out. Now, the original Xbox, for everything I could say, has its problems, but for a first console, wasn't inherently terrible. Definitely wasn't the best and definitely wasn't the worst of their consoles, but it did okay. Well, at least to the consumer. Internally, as we would find out later, much later, the original Xbox killed them financially. They were hemorrhaging money. Now, when it comes to talking about Xbox, a lot of people want to give them credit and all their contributions to gaming. I'm here to make you the genuine argument they didn't add enough to gaming. The three things you can really credit them for is the advancement of the shooting genre with games like Halo, Xbox Live Arcade, which really helped push indies back in the day, being the biggest proponent of online gaming. They're the ones who arguably have the best online gaming systems and were the biggest pushers of online achievements for gaming, which makes sense considering you are Microsoft. I just don't think those three pros, and it really is only those three pros, that justify their place in gaming in any way, shape, or form. And I'll go over the reasons why as I break it down. Because at the end of the day, even the worst companies, people can say whatever they want about Nintendo and how antiquated their online is, how antiquated their consoles are. But you know the one thing that they do really well that really fucking matters? Make video games. So even though the Xbox console, the original OG Xbox, because I have to say it that way because of the shitty naming convention problem we're going to run into later, because that console didn't make a lot of money, but Microsoft had a lot of money and was willing to pay for more mind share, which if nothing else, the Xbox brand did successfully accomplish. People knew about the brand. People would come to know more about the brand. The brand would become more well known over time. So if nothing else, it did gain that. They decided, hey, let's go forward and move on with the next console. A lot of people like to equate Xbox's failure with the Xbox One. No, sir. It is with the 360. And it is for a multitude of reasons. A lot of people think I'm just going to bring up the Red Ring of Death, which, spoiler alert, is a huge issue. But I think it's a huge issue in ways that people don't normally talk about. People just talk about it in terms of, well, the console's broke, and so the console's being broke means that gamers couldn't really enjoy the games. We don't talk about some of the other problems the 360 had and some of the things that the Red Ring of Death also caused. For example, the cause of the Red Ring of Death was literally the fact that the console was consistently overheating, and it would get to the point where it would just start damaging the internals of the system. So think about it. Microsoft, a company that mainly handles PC and software development, couldn't make a console that cooled properly. Now, the reports of how many consoles were suffering from this issue vary from person to person. I think the lowest I saw was somewhere between 25 to 30%, and the highest I saw was like 50%. But even if we want to be generous and say 1 out of every 4 Xboxes broke down, that's an absurd number for anything. Every console manufacturer and console launch will have defective units. That's just, it's the margin of error, right? It's not the problem. Why is it 1 out of every 4 consoles was it bricking? Just dying and bricking. You lost money on the lawsuit. You lost money on extending the warranty. You lost money on fixing the devices. And if that was the only problem with the 360, it would still be bad, but it wouldn't be as bad at what the actual reality is. What was the other issue, you may ask? Oh, the console itself would scratch discs. Fun fact, by the way, they never fixed the problem. And you know what the issue was? And people have looked it up. They didn't make proper housing for the discs to be read. So any slight jostle or vibration in the floor or wherever the thing was standing at would cause it to possibly jumble it and scratch the discs. And some of you would go, well, you know, if you put it on a stable surface, it wouldn't be a problem. Here's the other thing. If it scratched the disc, which was a fault of the hardware, and if you looked up how to fix it, it would have only cost them 30 cents. 30 cents per console to fix it. And they never fixed it. Even if you get the slim and the later models, you will still run into that problem if you're not careful with your console. But here's even what makes it worse. They charged you to replace the disc. So your console breaks your disc because of the shitty hardware manufacturing of the 360. And not all games were covered, by the way. If it was like first party, Microsoft would fix it for a fee. So you would have to pay $20 to get it fixed if it got scratched. So that $60 game would turn into an $80 game if it was first party. If it was third party, you were either SOL, where you would just lose the game and have to go buy another one, or the company might have been cool enough to cover it. Spoiler, there wasn't a lot of companies cool enough to cover it. The 360 is a piece of shit as hardware. People always get mad when I drag this out, but I need you to understand something. There is no world where you can release something this faulty and damaged and broken and it succeed purely off of brand recognition. It makes no fucking sense. You cannot put me a piece of shit and be like, well, this right here, this Xbox right here, worth the $250. Who gives a fuck? It keeps breaking. And some of you go, well, it wasn't that bad. Really? The fact that Xbox is more synonymous with its main issue than it is as a gaming console is crazy to me. People know about the 360 as much as they know about the Red Ring of Death. No error should be that prevalent on one system. But here we are. So I think there's a hard truth that Xbox fans have not acknowledged about Xbox. And it's very simple. Xbox doesn't make games. No, what Xbox likes to do is be a third-party publisher. No. They totally make games. Come on, bro. What about the big 3? Halo, Forza, and whatever the Halo, Forza, and Gears, man. Okay, first off, I want us to be completely honest here. Only one of those is actually made by Microsoft. The other 2 are not. What do you mean? Well, let me explain. So, Halo was developed by Bungie, which left in 2007 and 343 took over. Halo wasn't even a game that was originally made for the Xbox. It was something Bungie was already working on. Microsoft saw it and said, hey, I want that, and took it, and they own the IP. And the kicker is the version of Halo that most people like isn't even the modern era Halo. It's the old school Halo. You know, the one that died in 2007? Cool, great. Now Forza, that is done internally, which congratulations, you got one. Even though they just recently laid off people from the main Forza team. What do you mean? Yeah, they laid off the main era Forza team. They laid off some people from that team. I think they've essentially said we're just gonna focus on the side series, you know, the Horizon series. Yeah, good job on the whole supporting that one IP you actually made. And then if you look at Gears, it's a similar issue. The mainline Gears games that people care about, 1 through 3, that was done by Epic Games. Once again, they kept the rights to Gears, but the Coalition is the one that's been developing the game since. And regardless of how you feel about the quality of those games, games, it's obvious that when people rank the top best Gears of War games, it's the first 3 that are usually on the top of the list. So drop off in quality, yo. It's funny that we've been getting angry about Microsoft's latest acquisitions as if this hasn't been their MO the whole fucking time. That they don't make games, they just buy developers who make the games for them. And the reason why that's a problem is because that means you have no internal development that knows what the fuck they're doing. And some of you will throw out Rare, right? Because they've had Rare longer than Nintendo ever had access to Rare. And you know, Rare was a well-known and established company, even though we don't talk about the obvious fact that the most well-known version of Rare is still the Nintendo Rare. You want to know how many games of quality we've gotten from Rare since the Microsoft era? 2, and one of which hasn't been relevant in years, over a decade in fact. The 2 games I'm referring to are Sea of Thieves, which has been this ongoing experience for I want to say the last 5 or 6 years at this point. And then you also have Viva Pinata, a game from like 2008. And have you seen anything else of Viva Pinata since 2008? No, you haven't. And you're probably not going to. If we talk about any of other Rare's IPs they make games for, Banjo-Kazooie, dead. Conker, dead. Perfect Dark, recently confirmed to be dead again. What have you gotten from Rare to make them this high-tier developer in Microsoft's camp? What did they do around 2009? They bought Minecraft. They've been buying studios since they've been conceived. That's how they survive. So when people say, why don't you get excited for Microsoft games? Why aren't you excited for the old era of Xbox? Let me tell you something. The method hasn't changed. All they're doing is the same shit they were doing back in the day. They're just making worse decisions. So they're just buying a studio, taking an IP credit, and then people being like, oh man, that's the Xbox brand, okay? And then back in the day, it worked a little bit better because they had better choices and were making better decisions and money moves. Now, it's just whatever I can grab and whatever I can catch my name onto. Just wanna, that's an Xbox title. I mean, things like Cuphead, Ori, they all fall in that line of, well, the studio was already making the game. They were already cooking, right? The food was cooking. It was smelling delicioso. And they were like a third-party publisher, hey, you want some money to buy some more ingredients? And they said, sure. And then what happened? Xbox. And then people wonder why I don't really have any love or care for this just conglomerate. You didn't add any fucking thing. Anybody could have gave them money. I imagine at this point in time, you guys are probably thinking one thing. Well, Terrell, just because a company is releasing games as like a publisher and not as a developer, as long as the consumer is getting good games, what's the problem? And technically you would be right, but we both know this is a lot more nuanced than that. On top of which, we know that some games led to decisions that Xbox could never truly take back. Enter the best-selling game on the 360, a Kinect game. You know, it's funny with all this talk about how Xbox is for the hardcore gamer and your best-selling game is a Wii knockoff. Yo, couldn't be me. Kinect Adventures is the best-selling game on the 360, selling 24 million copies. Even outsold GTA 5, which is at 22 mil. You know what that showed to Xbox? Hey, that Kinect thing, people are really interested in that Kinect thing. Maybe we should put that as a main focus of our next console. Enter the Xbox One. Now, I'm gonna be real with you. There are literal essays and videos talking about the downfall of the Xbox One, and it goes over every little thing. Since that was in 2013, it is fully documented, and I would hate to beat a dead horse, but we do need to address some aspects of it. But I'm going to talk about something that isn't talked about as much, and it's also a very important lesson in the gaming industry or anything you do in life. So in life, they always talk about effort and work and skill and all these other attributes that will lead to you being successful in life. And all these things are true, but there is one aspect of life that you can never truly prepare yourself for, and that is luck. Luck somehow plays a part in almost anything you do, and you won't know what's gonna happen until it happens. And as much as I hate to say it, not every single decision Xbox made during the Xbox One generation was a terrible one. They just had really bad luck in some of these. Let's take some of the games that were released, for example. Sunset Overdrive has literally everything going for it. Developed by Insomniac, which had the Spyro the Dragon, Ratchet and Clank, and later on the Marvel Spider-Man accolades of fame behind it. Microsoft footed the bill, so it didn't even cost Insomniac anything to make the game themselves, and it was getting good review scores across the board. Literally, that game didn't have anything going against it. So why is it when you go and look at the financial reports of that year, that game only made like $400 and something of profit for Insomniac? Because the game has a cult following. I mean, for God's sakes, I just finished streaming it not too long ago on my streaming channel. Not a subtle push for the streaming channel, but you get my thing. Anywho, the fact is that game literally should have done huge numbers, should have been a major success, should have been the start of a franchise for them. And then what happened? It didn't sell incredibly well at launch. The DLCs and add-ons didn't really do anything crazy in movement for numbers. And then Insomniac was later bought by Sony, where they would go on to make Marvel Spider-Man. And you're just like, damn, that's kind of crazy. Even that game, Rise Son of Rome, which was done by Crytek, another well-known and respected developer. The game wasn't bad, had potential, could have turned into a franchise of its own. What happened? Didn't really sell well. Crytek didn't want to give up the rights for the IP, and now the game is kind of stuck because Microsoft can't make another game even if they wanted to, because they would have to go through Crytek, and Crytek has no interest in doing that. So jeez, okay. Well, what about Killer Instinct? People don't realize that Killer Instinct was viewed more as a Xbox Live Arcade type of game when it first came out. It was like, hey, we're gonna push this to kind of help pad out the Xbox One's library at launch. And then the game kind of became more than that. It grew and gained a genuine fan base, and people generally love the game. It got like, what, 3 or 4 seasons of content? And then, as you all know, the Xbox Live Arcade team kind of dissolved, got reabsorbed into Xbox. And now those people who worked on that game may not have been fired, but just pulled into different branches of the Xbox brand. So now if Killer Instinct wanted to be viewed as a high profile or true game release for Xbox, then, you know, they would have to look at it as a AAA experience and not an arcade game. And as we can see, that didn't happen. And then you have the Crackdown 3 and State of Decay 2 situations. Fun fact, Crackdown has never had a consistent developer. They've always switched. Every game has a different developer, and it became a gamble of, hey, I'm about to roll the dice and let's hope the developer we picked works out. Sumo Digital. Damn. That didn't, no, Lord. Well, that didn't work out. State of Decay had the similar issue, switching developers. Come on, big money, big money. Oh, is that Snake Eyes? Damn. The Xbox One made a lot of mistakes, especially in that first year. But I'll be real with you, some of the gaming ones weren't that terrible, all things considered. They just had incredibly bad luck with some of these releases. And it's funny, it was through all these failures and all this struggle that I think they came to a change. And who would mark that change? It's our boy, Phil. Started taking over around this time. Woo! Fill up! So as we know, Phil Spencer's claim to fame is the illustrious Xbox GamePass, right? Now, there's been a lot of talk about whether or not GamePass does this, GamePass does that. So I'm gonna just stick with the facts and then we'll go from there. Number 1, GamePass is profitable. Number 2, Game Pass does help with exposing smaller titles to newer gamers. Number 3, Game Pass still costs money to acquire new titles to appear on the service. And number 4, Game Pass does not prevent closures of studios or downsizing of teams. So Phil came into the gate around 2017, 2018, around pretty much the ending years of the Xbox One brand. So I'm gonna be real with you, a lot of the things that he could have done wouldn't really matter during that point because it takes a couple years for game announcements and acquisitions to really play a part. I will say he did try to make a genuine effort of getting different types of titles onto the Xbox store, the Xbox ecosystem. This is around the time we started seeing more Japanese titles pop up in Xbox presentations, and we were like, that's a little out of character, don't you think? It absolutely was, but it was cool. But like I said, Game Pass was his big claim to fame, and Game Pass to me has been a weird combination of good for the consumer, but for how long is my concern. So I think it was reported back in 2023, 2022, that they spent $1 billion just to acquire games for the service because, of course, yeah, smaller titles, you could give them the promise of exposure and that would cover them. But for games that were already prolific, like Assassin's Creed, for example, although that game was going to make money regardless. So how much you going to give Ubisoft to put it on a service where it would essentially make less money? Well, about $3 to $30 million, depending on the game. And it worked. Game Pass has steadily grown over the years. I think even this year hitting an all-time high. But once again, with all those closures and downsizing, it didn't stop them from losing people at their studios. It didn't stop people from losing their jobs. So yeah, you're making money, but where's that money going to? Where's that money funding? What's it helping, considering you also lost games during this premise? And this kind of gets into my fatal flaw in conversation of Xbox. Because of course, the next console to talk about would be the Xbox Series X and S. Fuck. Oh, actually, you know, that works. I'm gonna be honest with you. In terms of hardware, if we're just talking about hardware, and considering I own an Xbox Series X, it's right over here, heading off into the distance. I think that these two consoles have been the best piece of hardware they've ever made. And they're probably the most undermined by their parent company. The recent marketing with the whole everything's an Xbox has essentially said, well, the Xbox console is there if you want it, but it's also on laptops, it's also on phones, it's also on your PC, guys. And eventually I imagine it'll end up on other consoles like PlayStation and Nintendo, because why the fuck not? Because they don't really care about the console game anymore. With all those comments that Phil made in the last couple years when Redfall came out and died, it became painfully obvious that they gave the fuck up during the Xbox One generation and said, yeah, this ain't for us. Even though the kicker is it's never really been for them. They were just able to fake it longer to where the general consumer base never really noticed that you guys don't make shit. You guys don't make games. I don't even think you have a passion for games. You just had money and connections that allowed you to create business deals that were beneficial to you. And I think I have the reason why Xbox is probably more profitable now, at least Game Pass specifically, is because, well, look at all these acquisitions. That's the one thing they were always good at, is buying companies. Some of them were bad decisions during the 360 era, but the original OG Xbox era, they acquired some good companies which allowed them to flourish into the 360 era, even though they didn't fucking deserve it. Because think about it, if I own the company, then I don't have to pay you fees to get your game on my service. And that's what they did. And now they got Activision, and now they got Bethesda. And then you look over and you realize, oh wow, there goes Candy Crush and Call of Duty and Crash Bandicoot, and just all variety in the Fallout series, just a variety of titles that they no longer have to spend money for to get onto their service because, hey, I own them. It's our money now. I think in the grand scheme of things, the biggest problem Xbox always had is that there was just no passion for the game in there. There are people in that company who care about gaming, but I don't think Microsoft themselves ever cared about gaming. And Xbox was more of a fun side project that had some value in it, but never was anything more than a side project. And eventually, just like every other streaming service, they're gonna plateau. They're gonna hit that wall and not be able to go any higher. And the problem is, game costs are still expensive. So any of that money you're making is now being funneled into other projects if you're not canceling or firing people. And that to me is also a big issue of it. With all this money, with all this financial success you've gained, and you couldn't even stop yourself from still getting rid of people and getting rid of games and people's lives. And they all now are either contracted or have to go find a new job, which means either A, they don't have benefits or they just don't have a job at all. Woo, good fucking job. And now with even more and more conversation going on with new Xbox titles ending up on PlayStation and competing boxes or streaming services, it just makes you go, what the fuck is the point? Why in the hell do I specifically need an Xbox? And I think it's more sad that the gaming industry thinks it's okay. I mean, we're already in this position where games nowadays, more people are getting digital than physical. So there's even less of a reason to buy. And hell, Microsoft has made it increasingly harder to buy physical for their stuff. At some points, just not offering it at all. So when you look at that, okay, cool, you got Game Pass. What else you got? Well, we're coming out with a handheld to do what? Play Game Pass on? If that's the case, just get out of the console space. And fun fact, I probably believe they will. What's the point of making another console? Your console wasn't even a problem now. The Series X is a great console. You know what your problem is? You don't give a fuck about it. But when people ask me why I'm not an Xbox fan, I said, be a fan of what? The 3 titles that they kind of own and kind of develop, but they kind of don't care for? Should I care because they're finally making hardware competently? Should I care because of a streaming service that'll eventually plateau and go through the same problems that every other streaming platform goes through, which is the uptick in price because they're not making enough money? Oh, wait, that's already happening. Can't even push the consoles because you uptick the prices on them. Upticking prices on games. And all your shit is in the cloud. All your shit's in the cloud. But somehow I gotta pay you more for cloud shit? It's all cloud? Damn. Xbox, to me as a whole, does nothing for gaming, or not nearly enough to justify the love and accolades it gets. So with that being stated, fuck 'em. Life's a game, play to win, and I will catch you guys later. Peace. Subscribe to the gaming channel and follow Donnie Arts on Twitter and on YouTube for helping me edit this video. Bye.